Aita for leaving my daughter? Lately, life has felt like it's moving around me, but I'm not really in it. I wake up, get Sophie dressed, make breakfast, work, clean, help her with little puzzles, put her to bed, and then sit on the couch, staring into nothing. I've always thought of myself as a hands-on mom. I'm there for bedtime stories, scraped knees, and every little drawing she proudly tapes to the fridge. But over the last few months, the weight of everything, the house, my job, motherhood, started pressing down so hard that even smiling felt like work. One night, after Sophie was asleep, I told Jacob how I'd been feeling. I wasn't angry, I wasn't frustrated, I was just tired in a way I couldn't explain. He looked concerned but calm, the way he always does when he's trying not to make things worse. Lena, he said, you've been running nonstop. I can't take time off right now, but maybe you should go away for a few days. Just you. Or take Mia. You need this. At first, I laughed it off. And leave Sophie? But he was serious. You're not abandoning her. You'd be recharging. She has the nanny. I'll make sure she's fine. The thought scared me and comforted me at the same time. So, after talking it over with Mia, I said yes. We booked a cabin by the coast. Nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, a little kitchen, a balcony that overlooked the water. The trip was quiet, peaceful. I'd wake up to the sound of gulls and the smell of salt in the air. In the afternoons, Mia and I would walk along the beach, our shoes in hand, talking about everything and nothing. I didn't realize how much I'd missed the feeling of just being a person, not only a mother. On the 3rd day, I called home to hear Sophie's voice. Instead of the nanny, Marlene, my mother-in-law, answered. Her tone was clipped from the start. She told me the nanny had gotten the flu the day after I left. Jacob had tried to find a temporary sitter, but Marlene insisted on stepping in so Sophie would be with family instead of a stranger. When I got home, I walked in smiling, ready to hug Sophie. She ran into my arms, giggling, her little curls bouncing, and for a moment, everything felt right. But when I turned to greet Marlene, her face was sharp, almost cold. She didn't even say hello. Do you know what it's like to look after a 4-year-old for a week? I barely slept. I cooked. I cleaned. I read her stories. I played with her. All while you were on a vacation. I blinked. I appreciate you helping, but I didn't ask you to do that. Jacob said you offered. Her eyebrows shot up. I only offered because the alternative was letting a stranger raise her for a week. But you, she shook her head. You should never have left her in the first place. I felt my throat tighten. Marlene, I had arrangements. You weren't supposed to be involved at all. If you didn't want to help, you could have said no. I never expected this to fall on you. She crossed her arms. That's because you don't understand what real mothers do. Real mothers don't take time off from their children. It hit me harder than I expected. My voice wavered, but I kept my words steady. I love Sophie more than anything. I needed a break so I could come back and be better for her. And she was cared for. If you're upset, that's about your choice to step in, not about me being gone. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned away, muttering something under her breath about selfish priorities. Since then, she's been icy. She avoids coming over when I'm home. She's dropped comments to Jacob's siblings about how Sophie deserves more stability. One of his cousins even messaged me, saying, I don't know what happened, but I hope you and Marlene work things out for Sophie's sake. Jacob says to ignore it. She'll move on. She just likes to be the hero in every situation. But I can feel the tension building like a storm that hasn't broken yet. Family dinners are awkward. Sophie keeps asking why grandma doesn't visit as much. And I can't help wondering if this is the start of something bigger, something that could sit between us for years. Because now, no matter how many times I remind myself I did nothing wrong, her words still echo in my head. Real mothers don't take time off.
Update.
It's been 5 days since Jacob told Marlene there would be no family meeting, but I've had the uneasy feeling that something was still happening behind the scenes. That feeling turned out to be right. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call from Sophie's preschool director asking if I could come in to clarify a few things. Her tone was polite, but careful, too careful. When I arrived, she led me to her office, closed the door, and placed a folder on the desk between us. Inside was a printed email. It was from Marlene. The email claimed I'd been struggling to care for Sophie and often left her in the care of others for extended periods without notice. It asked the preschool to be vigilant and report any concerns to her directly, since she was actively involved in Sophie's living arrangements. My chest felt heavy as I read it, my fingers trembling slightly against the paper. I told the director this wasn't true, that Sophie was safe and cared for, and she nodded, saying she understood. But she also said that if someone claims to have partial guardianship or significant involvement, the school has to keep a record. It's just protocol, she said, but I could see the doubt behind her eyes. That's when it hit me. Marlene wasn't just trying to turn family against me. She was trying to leave a paper trail. When I got home, Jacob was in the living room with his laptop open. I told him everything, and he didn't say a word at first, just shut the lid and sat back. Then he told me something I didn't expect. That morning, he'd gotten a call from his uncle, who accidentally let slip that the family meeting I'd been told was canceled had actually happened 2 nights ago at Marlene's house. She'd gathered a handful of relatives and, apparently, brought out a folder of evidence about me, photos of Sophie with her nanny money, screenshots of social media posts from my trip, even a copy of a grocery delivery receipt she'd somehow gotten, claiming it proved I wasn't cooking for Sophie myself. Jacob said his uncle told her flat out she was crossing a line, but others at the table just nodded along. I sat there in silence, trying to make sense of it, when I heard the sound of a car door outside. I peeked through the curtain. It was Marlene. She walked up to our porch holding a bag of toys and a small envelope. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, placing the bag on the couch. "These are for Sophie," she said, then handed me the envelope. "And this is for you." Inside was a typed letter. The first paragraph was almost sweet, saying she understood that motherhood was overwhelming and that some women aren't cut out for the constant demands. The next paragraph was colder. She wrote that she had spoken with people who could help take some of the burden off me, and that the arrangement could be as temporary or permanent as needed. She didn't say the word custody, but every line of the letter felt like it was circling that idea. I told her, in the calmest voice I could manage, that I didn't need help raising my daughter and that she needed to stop this right now. Her eyes didn't soften. "One day, Lena, you'll thank me for stepping in. You'll see this is for Sophie's best interest." At that moment, Sophie came running into the room, excited to see her grandmother. Marlene knelt down, hugged her tightly, and whispered something I couldn't hear. When Sophie pulled back, she looked confused and asked, "Mommy, why would I live in Grandma's house?" My heart dropped. I told Marlene it was time to go. She didn't argue, just stood, gave me a long, unreadable look, and left. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Jacob and I agreed we couldn't just hope this would go away. We started gathering our own records, texts, photos, emails, to protect ourselves. I never thought I'd be in a position where I had to defend my right to raise my own child against someone in my own family. But now I realize this isn't just tension or misunderstanding. This is a line being drawn, and I don't know what's going to happen when one of us finally steps over it.
Update 2.
This morning started quietly, almost too quietly. Jacob had taken Sophie to the park so I could catch up on laundry and get a little peace. I was halfway through folding a stack of towels when my phone started buzzing. First one notification, then another, then a flood of them. It was a group chat I didn't recognize, full of Jacob's extended relatives, some I'd only met once or twice. At the top, the group name read, "For Sophie's future." When I opened it, my heart started pounding. The very first message was from Marlene, and it wasn't written like casual family chatter. It was formatted like a formal letter. She'd written that recent concerns about Sophie's upbringing had reached a point where family unity and intervention were necessary. The rest of the message outlined observations about my parenting, claims that I leave Sophie in the care of unrelated individuals for prolonged periods, that I have exhibited signs of emotional withdrawal, and that multiple sources had confirmed I was often unavailable during critical moments in Sophie's development. I could feel my ears getting hot as I scrolled. A few of Jacob's cousins had responded with heart emojis and "we'll do whatever it takes." Others stayed silent, but one message caught my eye. It was from Jacob's younger cousin Leah, who wrote, "Has anyone actually asked Lena about this?" Immediately after, Marlene replied, "This isn't about making her feel attacked. It's about protecting Sophie before it's too late." Before I could even process it, a new message came in. Marlene had posted a photo. It was a picture of Sophie standing in our driveway next to a delivery driver holding a grocery bag. The caption read, "This is what I'm talking about. Strangers around her without supervision." My stomach turned. The man in the photo was just the regular grocery delivery guy, and I had been standing on the porch, just out of frame, when that picture was taken. But in this thread, that small truth didn't matter. The image was enough to look suspicious to people who didn't know the context. Jacob came home about 20 minutes later, and I showed him everything. His jaw clenched as he read through the thread, but before he could say anything, his phone rang. It was his sister. I could hear her voice through the speaker. "You need to know, Mom is talking about filing for something called kinship care. She's been making calls to see if it's possible without going to court." The rest of the day was a blur of conversations. Jacob called his uncle, who confirmed that Marlene had been meeting with two of her friends who used to work in child services, just to understand her options. That phrase, her options, echoed in my head all afternoon. When we sat down for dinner that night, Sophie asked an innocent question that twisted the knife even deeper. "Mommy, if Grandma takes care of me, will you still visit?" She said it so softly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to ask. I wanted to cry, but I just smiled and told her no one was taking her anywhere. Still, she kept looking at me with those big, searching eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Marlene had been planting these seeds for weeks. I used to think this was just about control. Now, I'm starting to realize it's about rewriting the entire story of who I am as a mother and convincing everyone else to believe it. And that's the kind of thing you can't undo with a single conversation.
Update 3.
I didn't think things could get any stranger after the group chat incident, but today proved me wrong. It was around noon when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a man in a crisp navy suit holding a clipboard. He introduced himself as an independent family mediator mediator and said he'd been contacted to facilitate a voluntary conversation regarding custody concerns. For a moment, I thought it had to be some kind of scam, but then he read off my full name, Jacob's name, and Sophie's birthday. He explained that he wasn't with the court system yet, but that sometimes families hire mediators before things escalate legally. My stomach dropped. The only person who could have hired him was Marlene. I told him I wasn't agreeing to anything and that I wanted all communication to go through an attorney. He nodded politely and handed me a sealed packet. Inside were several pages, an outline of discussion points Marlene wanted addressed, including establishing regular overnight stays at Grandma's house, shared decision-making authority regarding medical care, and a gradual transition period for Sophie to spend extended time away from her primary residence. The language was careful, almost clinical, but it was clear she was preparing a path to take Sophie from me, piece by piece. I called Jacob immediately. He left work early and came straight home, but before he even took off his coat, his phone buzzed again. It was a video call from his cousin Leah. She looked flustered. She told us that during a small family dinner the night before, Marlene had made a presentation using a slideshow on her tablet. In it, she'd compiled photos, short video clips, and even screenshots of texts between me and friends, things I'd never sent her directly, but somehow she'd gotten through other people. Leah said one slide in particular made everyone uncomfortable, a blurred photo of me sitting alone at the cabin during my trip with the caption, "While Sophie was home without her mother." The realization that she'd been quietly collecting this material for months made my skin crawl. It wasn't just meddling, it was surveillance. Someone had been feeding her information, and I had no idea who. Later that evening, Jacob stepped out to take a phone call from his uncle in the backyard. I was in the kitchen when Sophie wandered in holding something in her hand, a small, folded piece of paper. She said she'd found it inside one of the books Marlene had given her last week. I unfolded it and saw, in Marlene's handwriting, a short note. "Someday, you'll have your own room here. I'll make sure you're happy and safe." I don't know how long I stood there staring at it, but when Jacob came back inside, I handed it to him without a word. He read it once, then again, then crumpled it in his fist. That was the first time I'd ever seen him look truly afraid. Now, the house feels different, quieter, like we're waiting for something inevitable to happen, and neither of us knows when or how it will arrive. And deep down, I have this gnawing feeling that the next move Marlene makes won't be hidden in group chats or whispers at family dinners. It will be public, and once it's out there will be no taking it back.
Update 4.
It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Late afternoon. Sophie in the living room building a tower out of blocks. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up out of habit. The voice on the other end was calm but official. Someone from Sophie's school administration asking if I could come in for an urgent matter regarding her enrollment. My first thought was that Sophie had gotten sick or hurt, but the woman quickly clarified. She's fine. This is about a concern that was brought to our attention by a member of her family. By the time I reached the school office, my hands were damp with sweat. Sophie's teacher was there, along with the vice principal and a school counselor. They were all looking at me with that polite, professional concern that feels rehearsed. The vice principal started by saying they'd received a formal letter from a relative with significant involvement in Sophie's life, outlining possible safety and emotional well-being concerns. The letter wasn't signed Marlene, but I didn't need to see the name to know who had written it. The real blow came when they handed me a copy. It wasn't just accusations, it was a dossier. Pages of bullet points, each one referencing a specific incident, some going back nearly 2 years. The dates, the supposed witnesses, even the settings were disturbingly precise. One bullet read, April 14th, child was left with non-relative for over 4 hours without direct contact from parent. Witness, name redacted for privacy. Another said, June 3rd, parent exhibited signs of visible emotional distress in public setting while child was present. Child appeared withdrawn afterward. And then there was a section labeled evidence, where she'd included photographs, screenshots, and even excerpts from Sophie's own drawings. One picture Sophie had made, of a house with 2 figures inside and one outside, was captioned, child's depiction of feeling separated from primary caregiver. The school staff didn't say they believed it all, but they kept stressing they had a duty to assess and report if necessary. The counselor gently suggested that I cooperate fully so they could resolve this as quickly as possible. It was clear they were already thinking in terms of reports, forms, procedures. I drove home in a daze, my ears ringing. When I got there, Jacob was already in the kitchen, talking in a low voice on the phone. I caught just enough to realize he was speaking to his cousin Leo again. He hung up and told me Marlene had hosted what she was calling a community safety meeting at her church the night before. Apparently, she'd presented the same information, the same dossier, except this time she didn't stop at family. She'd invited neighbors, acquaintances, even one of Sophie's old babysitters. And during the meeting, she'd openly implied that we were struggling to meet Sophie's needs and that others might need to step in before the state does. That was when I noticed Jacob's phone buzzing again. It was a text from an unknown number, a grainy photo of me taken through what looked like the window of our living room. I was sitting on the couch, head in my hands, Sophie's toys scattered on the floor. The message said, "She's documenting everything. Watch yourself." The first thought that hit me wasn't anger. It was the cold, hollow realization that someone had been inside our yard, close enough to see into our home. And that whoever sent that text wasn't warning me to be kind. They were warning me because they knew Marlene was watching us more closely than we'd ever imagined. That night, Sophie woke up crying from a nightmare. I went to her room and found her curled up, whispering that Grandma said I might have to live with her soon if things get worse. I held her until she fell back asleep, but I couldn't shake the way she'd said it. Not scared exactly, but like she was already preparing herself for it. Now, the house doesn't feel like ours anymore. Every shadow outside makes me wonder if there's a camera. Every time Sophie draws a picture or says something out of the ordinary, I catch myself wondering how Marlene would twist it into evidence. And for the first time, I'm not just afraid of what she might try next. I'm afraid she's already won over enough people that when she finally makes her move, we'll be standing alone.
This situation is incredibly tough and heartbreaking. Taking a break to recharge as a parent isn't selfish, it's essential for mental health and being the best caregiver possible. Yet Marlene's extreme reaction crosses boundaries, weaponizing concern into control and surveillance, trying to undermine your role as a mother by gathering evidence, and involving the school and extended family is manipulative and invasive. You are not the Aita here. Needing space doesn't mean neglecting your child. It means preserving your well-being for Sophie's sake. Marlene, however, is acting like the real antagonist, turning family into a battleground over power disguised as care. Stay firm, document everything, and trust your instincts. This is a fight over respect and parental rights, not a question of love or dedication. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments.
Story 2.
Aita for asking my husband to put his phone down and help with our newborn. Our son, Jonah, is 3 months old. He had his first round of vaccines this afternoon, and it was harder on him than I expected. The crying started as soon as we walked in the door. Not the usual soft fussing. It was sharp and full, his little face red, his body tense in my arms. I held him close, swaying from side to side in the living room. The rhythm usually helps, but today nothing seemed to comfort him for long. I could feel his tiny heart racing against my chest. Ethan, my husband, was sitting on the couch. His eyes were on his phone, thumb moving in a steady scroll. I kept hoping he would notice how hard Jonah was crying or see the look on my face and put the phone down on his own. Then his phone rang. It was one of his friends, the same friend who usually calls when they want to play online games together at night. I knew what was coming before Ethan even answered. He picked up, laughed at something his friend said, and I could hear the easy, relaxed tone in his voice, so different from the tension in the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even sound frustrated. I just said, "Not tonight, please. I need you to help me." Ethan froze for a moment. His smile faded. He ended the call without saying goodbye and looked at me in a way that made my stomach knot. "You don't get to tell me what I can and can't do," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but there was an edge to it, tight, sharp, and final. I didn't want to start a fight, especially not with Jonah crying in my arms, so I just nodded. I went back to pacing, humming softly to our son, even though my own throat felt tight. A little while later, Ethan stood up and took Jonah from me without saying a word, and within a few minutes, Jonah stopped crying. He curled against Ethan's chest, eyelids heavy, breathing slowing. Part of me was relieved. Part of me felt pushed aside. I thought maybe things were calming down. But when Jonah started fussing again, I reached out and asked for him back. Ethan didn't hand him over. "I've got him," he said. There was no warmth in his voice. It wasn't about Jonah anymore. It was about control. That's how it felt anyway. I told him to give Jonah back. He said no. I told him again. His voice rose. Mine did too. Jonah was in the middle of it, his little head turning at the sound of our voices. Then Ethan said he was taking Jonah to his sister's house tomorrow. It's about an hour away. He didn't ask if that was okay, he told me. I reminded him Jonah is exclusively breastfed and that we'd have to plan feedings carefully. He shrugged it off, said I was making a big deal out of nothing. The tension in the room thickened until I felt like I couldn't breathe. In the heat of the moment, I said something I regret. I compared him to his father. It's something I know cuts deep. I wish I had swallowed the words, but I didn't. didn't. He went quiet, not the kind of quiet that cools things down, the kind that feels like a wall. He turned his face away, and I could see the muscles in his jaw moving. I tried to apologize. He didn't respond. Jonah was calm again, looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own living room. Hours later, we're still avoiding each other. Jonah is finally asleep in his crib. The house is too quiet. I keep replaying the evening in my head, wondering if I crossed a line, or if I was just asking for help at a moment when I truly needed it.
Update.
I woke up this morning to the sound of Jonah stirring in his crib. It was still early, just light enough to see the outline of the curtains. Ethan wasn't in bed. I figured maybe he had gone to make coffee or was already up with Jonah, but when I stepped into the hallway, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Jonah was still in his crib, kicking lightly, his little eyes opening and closing. I picked him up, whispered good morning, and walked into the kitchen. That's when I saw it. Ethan's keys weren't on the counter where he always leaves them. His wallet was gone too, and so was his jacket. I set Jonah in his rocker and called his phone. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. My first thought was that he'd gone for an early drive to clear his head, but then I saw his laptop bag missing. That wasn't a quick drive sign. An hour passed. Jonah fussed for his morning feed, and I tried to focus on him, but my mind was running through every worst-case scenario. By the time I put him down for his nap, I had called Ethan 5 times. No answer. Around 9 a.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. It wasn't Ethan's car. It was his friend, Tyler, the one he plays games with at night. Tyler looked uncomfortable. He had a small cardboard box in his hands. When I opened the door, he said, "Ethan asked me to drop this off." I took it, confused, and he left before I could ask questions. Inside the box were some of Ethan's things, a hoodie, a small stack of notebooks, and an old photo of him and Jonah from the hospital, printed and framed. At the bottom was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a note exactly. It was a printed itinerary for a hotel 2 towns over. 1 room, 2 nights. The check-in date was today. I felt my stomach turn cold. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that he had booked it without telling me, or the quiet way he'd sent his friend to drop off personal things like it was some kind of message. I called him again. This time he picked up. Before I could speak, he said, "I need time to think. I'll be back." I asked him what the hotel was for. He hesitated for a long time, then said, "It's not what you think," and hung up. The rest of the day felt like it moved through fog. Every sound, every creak in the house made me look toward the door. I kept replaying last night in my mind, trying to figure out how we went from a tense evening to this, him disappearing with no explanation. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "He's here. He's fine. Don't call again tonight." I didn't know who it was from. The message made my hands shake. Who was he with? Why couldn't I call? Jonah started crying in the other room, pulling me back to the moment. I picked him up, pressing my cheek to his warm head, trying to keep my breathing steady. But deep down, I knew something had shifted in a way that wouldn't be easy to undo. Tonight, the house feels bigger, emptier. And I don't know if Ethan is trying to find space to fix things or building space to leave.
Update 2.
The next morning, I didn't sleep in. I couldn't. I spent most of the night lying in bed with Jonah's bassinet pulled close, my hand resting lightly on his chest just to feel the steady rise and fall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the text from that unknown number. It was burned into my brain. By 7 a.m., I was pacing the kitchen, my phone in one hand, Jonah balanced against my shoulder. I had decided that if Ethan didn't contact me before noon, I would drive to the hotel myself. I didn't want a confrontation, but I needed answers. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. It was a picture, no text, just a blurry shot of Jonah, clearly taken the day he was born. But the strange thing was, it wasn't a photo I'd ever seen before. The angle was wrong. I wasn't in it. Ethan wasn't in it. I texted back immediately. "Who is this?" No reply. It made no sense. I tried to think logically. Maybe Ethan had sent it from a friend's phone. But that wouldn't explain why it was a photo I'd never seen, taken by someone I didn't know. By late morning, I'd had enough. I packed Jonah's diaper bag, put him in his car seat, and drove to the hotel listed on Ethan's itinerary. It was a small place off the highway, with a parking lot half full of dusty cars. I sat there for a long minute, gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering. I finally went inside. The woman at the front desk was polite but firm. She said she couldn't give me information about guests without their permission. When I told her I was his wife and that I was worried, she hesitated. Then she leaned in slightly and said, "He checked out this morning. Early." That stopped me. Checked out? I asked if she knew where he went. She shook her head but said, he wasn't alone when he left. The air seemed to leave my lungs. I asked her what she meant. She looked uncomfortable, then said, a woman picked him up. They didn't seem upset with each other. I walked out without saying another word. The drive home felt like a blur. Jonah babbled in the back seat, the sound both comforting and heartbreaking. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a box on the porch. No name, no return address. Inside were more of Ethan's things, his shaving kit, a sweatshirt I'd bought him last Christmas, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. The letter inside was short. I'm figuring things out. Don't make this harder than it already is. Jonah's safe with you. I'll be in touch.
No explanación, no epaledi.
Just distance. I sat on the floor with Jonah next to me, staring at the letter until my eyes blurred. I didn't know if this was the beginning of the end, or just a storm we hadn't learned how to stand in yet. But for the first time, I realized I couldn't control what Ethan was doing or who he was with. The only thing I could do was decide how much of myself I was willing to lose while waiting for him to decide.
Update 3.
It's been 5 days since Ethan left. The silence in the house has become its own kind of noise. Loud, constant, heavy in the air. I've stopped expecting him to walk through the door, but I still keep checking the driveway without meaning to. Jonah has been more restless at night. I don't know if he senses the change or if it's just a growth spurt, but holding him in the dark feels different now. It feels like I'm the only one standing between him and a world that's already too complicated. Yesterday, I decided to clean out the hall closet. It was something to keep my hands busy, to stop my mind from circling the same questions over and over. Buried behind a stack of old blankets was a small black duffel bag I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine, and I didn't remember seeing Ethan use it before. When I unzipped it, my stomach dropped. Inside was a folder with papers, printed emails, receipts, even a bank statement that wasn't from our joint account. The bank name was different. There was a balance in it I didn't recognize, several $1,000s. The account wasn't in Ethan's name, but the address listed was his sister's. There was also a receipt for a storage unit in a town 30 minutes away, paid in cash. The rental had started 2 weeks ago. I sat on the floor for a long time, just staring at the papers, feeling like I'd opened a door I wasn't meant to see behind. It wasn't just that he had a separate account or a storage unit. It was that he'd hidden them so completely. He had built a whole quiet corner of his life that didn't include me. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the storage unit. By morning, I had convinced myself to go. Jonah was with my mom for the day, so I drove out there, the folder of papers in the passenger seat. The facility was one of those long rows of identical metal doors. When I gave the number on the receipt to the clerk, she looked up at me and said, "You're not on the account." I told her I was his wife, that I was just trying to make sure everything was okay. She didn't budge, but I could tell she was curious. Finally, she said, "He was here 2 days ago, with a woman. They had a baby carrier with them." My first instinct was panic, thinking Jonah had been with them, but he hadn't left my side since Ethan walked out, which meant the baby carrier was for someone else's child. I left before I could ask more questions. The drive home felt unreal, like I was moving but not really there. When I got back, there was a small envelope taped to my front door. No name, no stamp, just my address written in Ethan's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It said, "Stop looking. I'll explain soon. This isn't what you think." But it didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a warning. Now, I'm sitting here with Jonah asleep beside me, the envelope on the table, and this low, constant feeling in my chest that I don't know the man I married anymore. I keep thinking about that baby carrier and the woman at the hotel, and the money in the account I never knew about. And I don't know if the truth, when it comes, will be something I can live with.
Update 4.
Ethan came back last night, not with an apology, not with flowers or explanations, just with himself, standing in the doorway like nothing had been broken, while the smell of cold air and gasoline clung to his jacket. Jonah was in his swing, half asleep, and the sound of the motor filled the silence between us. Ethan's eyes kept moving from me to Jonah, back to me, as if he was waiting for my permission to step inside. I didn't say anything. Eventually, he walked past me and sat on the edge of the couch. "I know you've been looking," he said. His voice wasn't angry, but there was something in it that made me feel small. He told me he had found out about the storage unit visit, about me asking questions at the hotel. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said, "I wasn't hiding from you. I was hiding you." Those words didn't make sense. I asked him what he meant, and that's when he told me about the woman. She wasn't a stranger, he said. She was someone he'd known before we met. Years ago, she had been involved in something dangerous with a man Ethan used to work for. Recently, she had shown up again, claiming she was being followed, and she had a baby with her. Not his, he swore, but she had begged him for help. He said he didn't tell me because he didn't want that part of his past anywhere near Jonah and me. He claimed the hotel, the money, even the storage unit were all part of trying to get her somewhere safe. safe, that the baby carrier I heard about was for her child. I wanted to believe him, but there were too many holes. If it was about protection, why the secrecy? Why the bank account with his sister's address? Why leave without a word, without telling me where he was going or when he'd be back? When I pressed him, his voice got tight. He said there were things I couldn't know because they'd put us in danger, that the less I asked, the safer we'd be. It sounded like something from a movie, not real life. I told him that keeping me in the dark wasn't protecting me, it was isolating me. And then I said something I hadn't planned to say. If you walk out again without telling me, don't come back. For a moment, I thought he might leave right then. But instead, he stood up, went over to Jonah, and knelt down to touch his tiny hand. His eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Then, he whispered something to Jonah I couldn't hear. When he looked back at me, his expression had changed, almost like he'd made a decision I wasn't part of. He said, I'll stay tonight, but tomorrow, I have to finish this. He didn't explain what this was. And now I'm lying in bed, listening to him breathe next to me, wondering if tomorrow is the day he leaves for good, or the day everything finally unravels.
You're not Aita. Parenting a newborn is a brutal marathon, not a sprint. And asking for teamwork isn't a power grab at survival. Ethan's dismissal, control moves, and mysterious disappearances scream emotional evasion, not strength. Secret accounts and shadowy protections sound like a spy thriller, but real life demands honesty and shared trust. If he wants to shield you, the best armor is transparency, not secrets. You didn't cross a line, you're just standing your ground amid chaos. Keep boundaries firm, prioritize your sanity, and don't buy the cloak-hand dagger act. Parenthood's hard enough with outside plots. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out Aita for blocking my ex after rehab. Click here to watch it now.